Saskatchewan, a land of living skies. Saskatchewan is a province in Western Canada, bordered by Alberta on the west, by the Northwest Territories on the north, by Manitoba on the east, by Nunavut to the northeast, and on the south by the U.S. states of Montana and North Dakota. Along with Alberta, Saskatchewan is one of only two landlocked provinces in Canada. Saskatchewan is the only Canadian province whose borders do not correspond to physical geographic features, with its borders largely following the geographic coordinates of longitude and latitude. Saskatchewan is quadrilateral, namely a shape with four sides. Saskatchewan's total surface area is 651,900 square kilometers. It contains two major natural regions, namely the boreal forest in the north and the prairies in the south. Between the two regions is an aspen parkland transition zone near the North Saskatchewan River on the western side of the province, and near to south of the Saskatchewan River on the eastern side. With nearly 10% being freshwater, mostly rivers, reservoirs, and lakes, Saskatchewan has 14 major drainage basins draining into the Arctic Ocean, Hudson Bay, and the Gulf of Mexico. The main waterways are the North Saskatchewan River and the South Saskatchewan River. In 2022, Saskatchewan's population was about 1.2 million. The majority live in the southern third of the province, south of the 53rd parallel, while the northern part is sparsely populated. Regina is the provincial capital, and Saskatoon is the largest city in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is derived from the Cree name for the Saskatchewan River, Kishishkachiwanishipi, meaning swift-flowing river. As an official name, Saskatchewan was adopted in 1882, when a portion of what is now Saskatchewan was designated a provincial district of the Northwest Territories. Saskatchewan had been inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. The first European to enter Saskatchewan was Henry Kelsey from England in 1690, who traveled up the Saskatchewan River in hopes of trading fur with local indigenous groups. The first permanent European settlement was a Hudson's Bay Company post at Cumberland House, founded in 1774 by English explorer and fur trader Samuel Hearne. Most of present-day Saskatchewan was part of Rupert's Land and controlled by Hudson's Bay Company, which claimed rights to all watersheds flowing into Hudson Bay. In 1870, Canada acquired Hudson's Bay Company's territories and formed the Northwest Territories to administer the vast area between British Columbia and Manitoba. Meanwhile, the Government of Canada entered into a series of treaties with local indigenous peoples. As the country entered the 20th century, the demand for provincial autonomy from the Northwest Territories grew louder and louder. In 1905, federal legislation to create two new provinces, carved out from the vast Northwest Territories, was introduced by Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier on February 21st. After long debate in the House of Commons, the bill was passed on July 5th to take effect on September 1st of the same year. Regina became the capital of Saskatchewan, whereas Edmonton was named the provisional capital of Alberta. Thanks to significant immigration of farmers from Germany, Ukraine, Scandinavia, and the US, In addition to influx of settlers from eastern Canada, Saskatchewan's population rose 5 times, from 91,000 in 1901 to nearly 500,000 by 1911. The immigration boom was largely attributable to the Dominion Lands Act of 1872. Aiming to encourage the settlement of the prairies, the Canadian Homesteading Act offered ownership of 160 acres, namely 65 hectares of land free, except for a $10 administration fee, to any male over 21 years of age who agreed to cultivate at least 40 acres of the land and build a permanent dwelling on it within 3 years. An extensive advertising campaign was launched throughout Western Europe and Scandinavia to promote the benefits of prairie living, using leaflets that described Western Canada as the last best West, a favorable place to live. In spite of initial difficulties of frontier life, such as distance from towns, sod homes, and back-breaking labor, several waves of new settlers established a European-Canadian style of prosperous agrarian society. Like several other provinces in Canada, the name Saskatchewan indicates a deep relationship with the Indigenous peoples. Notwithstanding the tremendous stories associated with the pioneers and adventurers, the stories of the Indigenous peoples demand greater attention in the prairies, or for that matter, the rest of Canada as well. As trading posts became centers of settlement and many growing into cities, in many areas, it resulted in displacement of First Nations. The town Indian Head serves as an example. Traveling on Trans-Canada Highway, 70 kilometers east of Regina, you will arrive at Indian Head, where a gigantic statue explains the history of the town. In the 1800s, the population of the First Nations was ravaged by diseases such as smallpox, brought west by the fur traders. Their remains were placed on the hills southwest of town, which became known as Indian Head Hills. The Canadian Pacific Railway arrived in 1882, and the townsfolk proposed to call this community Indian Head. In 1985, the statue was commissioned to honor this history. During your visit to Indian Head, learn about the buffalo rubbing stone. Early accounts in the 1870s speak of a sea of buffalo stretching from horizon to horizon. To survive the harsh winters, they grew heavy coats. As spring arrived, they used a huge solitary boulder to rub off the snarled hair. Such a rock could be found on land south of Indian Head, farmed by pioneer Graham Scott and relocated in 1998. The buffalo population decreased with the indiscriminate slaughter. Never again would we hear the distant thundering of 10,000 hooves. Take a few minutes to look at the Red River cart. First built in the early 1800s, the Métis, fur traders, and eventually the settlers used Red River carts to move west. Made entirely of wood and held together by wooden pegs and rawhide, it was easy to repair along the trail. Oxen, mules, or horses pulled loads up to 450 kilograms. The high wheels cleared stumps, rocks, and pushed through the mud and marsh, but could be removed to ford any stream. With no lubricants, squealing cart trains could be heard long before they could be seen. It was estimated at their peak, 2,500 Red River carts crossed the present-day Saskatchewan each year. Thanks to wind of change over time at the societal level, First Nations have become increasingly active in seeking justice for past inequities, especially related to the taking of Indigenous lands. The federal and provincial governments have negotiated on numerous land claims. In 1992, the federal and provincial governments signed a historic land claim agreement with First Nations in Saskatchewan. Under the agreement, the First Nations received compensation to buy land on the open market for the bands. As a result, over 3,000 square kilometers have been turned into reserve land under this process. While furs were touted as Prairie Region's first industry, for more than a century, agriculture has been Saskatchewan's backbone sector. Saskatchewan is endowed with natural resources. Clearly, the best of all natural gifts is soil, which is the source of most foods. Understanding Saskatchewan must start with gaining some knowledge about the province's land and climate. Saskatchewan has more hours of sunshine than any other Canadian province. When a city such as Regina reports an average of 2,300 hours of sunshine per year, it means the equivalent of over 6 hours per day. During the growing season from late April to September, the total number of sunshine hours can reach 1,400 hours, and that means more than 9 hours per day on average. In the late 1850s and early 1860s, scientific expedition teams arrived in the Prairie region. In particular, John Palliser's expedition from 1857 to 1859 resulted in the exploration of what subsequently became the Palliser Triangle. The expedition led by John Palliser had the mandate of, among other things, examining the region along the southern frontier between the parallels of 49 and 53 north latitude and from 100 to 115 degrees west longitude, with a view to surveying the watershed between the basins of the Missouri and the Saskatchewan. Placing southern Saskatchewan, the southwestern corner of Manitoba, and the southeastern corner of Alberta in his famous Palliser Triangle, Captain John Palliser concluded that these areas were extensions of the Great American Desert. Due to arid conditions and dry climate, cold and windy in winter with frequent blizzards on account of the openness of the prairie landscape, Palliser determined the region to be unsuitable for cultivation. As the Palliser Triangle accounted for a substantial portion of the Canadian prairies, Canadian expansionists out east questioned Palliser's assessment, and a host of factors led to homesteading in the Triangle country. While a portion of the area was kept for ranching, other parts were distributed to settlers for production of wheat and other crops. To a large extent, rainfall determines the type of agriculture that can be practiced. While the summer heat is favorable for farming, prolonged drought can affect agricultural areas. In the case of Saskatchewan, annual precipitation averages 300 to 450 millimeters across the southern area, with the bulk of rain falling in June, July, and August. Shortly after becoming a province of Canada, Saskatchewan earned the title of the Wheat Basket of Canada. For a long time, the prosperity of the prairies, including Saskatchewan, depended on the world price of grain. The steady growth of wheat price up until 1920 resulted in the doubling of acreage seeded. More and more, wheat was seen as the lifeblood of the big land stretching from Winnipeg to the Rockies. Any history book on the Canadian prairies must contain a section about the Dust Bowl and the Dirty 30s. The Great Depression hit especially hard in Western Canada. On the heels of the 1929 financial crisis was the long period of the dry and depressing 30s. Excluding periods when Canada was engaged in war, the 1930s was the blackest period in Western Canadian history. Historians noted that wheat prices struck their lowest point on Friday, December 16, 1932. The collapse of the world market was made worse by terrible drought. Black blizzards robbed fields of their best topsoil. Wind-blown soil piled up in railroad ditches and on headlands. Significant efforts were made to mobilize resources from various parts of the country to assist the prairie region, and the Canadian federal government passed the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Act of 1935, which played a crucial role in assisting prairie farmers to survive the difficult time. The Indian Head Research Farm was established at that time, thanks to the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Program. Located in the heart of the Canadian prairies, Saskatchewan is home to more than 40% of Canada's cultivated farmland, some of the best productive land in the world. With a vast productive land base and a collaborative approach to crop development research, Saskatchewan is playing an increasingly important role as a major food supplier to Canada and the rest of the world. In 2022, Saskatchewan produced 14.8 million tons of wheat, accounting for 44% of Canada's total wheat output. With 9.5 million tons of canola, Saskatchewan accounts for 52% of Canada's total. The province's barley production of 3.6 million tons and oats output of 2.6 million tons account for 36% and 49% of Canada's total amounts, respectively. Other grains such as flax, rye, peas, and lentils are also produced in the province. Saskatchewan is the world's largest exporter of mustard seed. The province's beef cattle production is only exceeded by Alberta. In addition to agriculture, mining and energy are also important sectors of the provincial economy. Pay a visit to the town of Lanigan, and one will understand why Saskatchewan is the world's largest exporter of potash. With its tremendous value in meeting the needs for crop fertilizer, potash has placed the province in an ideal position for claiming the title of Canada's wheat basket. In spite of a mix of important conditions, including extensive land, hot summer, and large potash deposits, it's the hard work and ingenuity of the prairie farmers that underlie the success of Saskatchewan's agriculture. Over the years, the province's agriculture sector has benefited from continued drive for innovation, such as John Deere tractors on rubber tires, mechanization including self-propelled combine and threshing as it advanced across a grain field. Research taking place in world-class institutions such as the Saskatoon Research and Development Centre, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, help ensure that the province retains its leading edge in agriculture. The province is much more than cropland. Saskatchewan has over 250,000 kilometers of roads and highways, the highest length of road service of any Canadian province. Take a road trip is one of the best ways to learn about what Saskatchewan is about. Drive along Highway 16, also known as the Yellowhead Highway, and you will hit a number of interesting places. For instance, located at the junction of Highway 80, the pretty town of Churchbridge provides a wonderful opportunity for you to take a picture of the dollar coin monument, which is erected in 1992 to celebrate the 125th anniversary of Canadian Confederation. Traveling further northwest at the junction of the Yellowhead Highway and Highway 310 between Yorkton and Saskatoon, the town of Foam Lake offers a terrific opportunity to pose for a photo in bright uniform, allowing you to reflect on the proud history of the Northwest Mounted Police that began providing police services back in 1874 by way of setting up posts across Saskatchewan. Viscount, an hour drive southeast of Saskatoon, is a neat village that welcomes visitors with open arms. Some 52 kilometers northwest of Saskatoon lies the small village of Borden, whose residents are dedicated to growing the best crops year after year. By the time the Yellowhead Highway enters Alberta, the border town of Lloydminster is an ideal stop for gas, food, and photos. The steel pillar represents the actual border between the two provinces. At this marker, you are literally standing on the boundary of the 3rd and 4th meridian of Western Canada. When driving along Trans-Canada Highway westward, it's literally like taking a crash course of Agronomy 101 plus Prairie Farm History 100. First stop is at Moosomin, which emerged as a service center for agriculture production. The Bell Barn at Indian Head is an historic treasure no one should miss. Named after the entrepreneurial leader Major William Bell, the original horse barn was erected in 1882. On top of the 10-meter-high lookout tower, Bell was able to see far and wide within an 8-kilometer radius. This reconstructed barn was built in 2008 using the original stones. The site has become a place where local residents are gathered for all sorts of fun activities. Only 70 kilometers west of Regina, Moose Jaw is a must-see. The city's number one attraction is, of course, the steel and concrete sculpture on the grounds of Moose Jaw's Visitor Center. Built in 1984, Mac the Moose had held the title of the world's tallest moose for 31 years until 2015, when it was surpassed by another moose statue in Store Elvdal, Norway, called the Big Elk. Because the Big Elk stood 30 centimeters taller, Mac the Moose had to settle for less, changing to either North America's largest moose or the world's second tallest moose. Being annoyed by this friendly rivalry, the Mac team mobilized support and resources to raise the height of the sculpture. Eventually, in October 2019, Mac reclaimed the title of the world's tallest moose when a new set of antlers were installed, raising its height to 10.36 meters, with an overall weight of about 10 tons. Along the way further west towards Swift Current, one has the opportunity of learning about the major crops of the province, such as wheat, canola, barley, oats, and so on. If you drive from Moose Jaw northwest, you will be amazed by some interesting village names, including Eyebrow and Elbow. Before taking a short ferry ride across the large Diefenbaker Lake, stop at the Riverhurst village, and even better, have a chat with the veterans who are gathered for coffee at the local Royal Canadian Legion branch. Isn't it interesting to stand next to the welcome sign of the village of Lucky Lake? I'm not sure if every villager has been a lucky winner of a lottery ticket, but folks here seem very happy for sure.
Fishing going well?
Saskatchewaners are people of character. For one thing, they refuse to let their province be treated as a land for fellow Canadians to just fly over or simply drive across. While the rest of the country are confused twice a year about the effect of time change, Saskatchewan has long figured out the enormous benefit of sticking to one uniform time all year round. By remaining on Central Standard Time all year, Saskatchewan shares the same time observed by Alberta during the summer months and observes the same time as Manitoba for the winter months. In other words, Saskatchewaners do not need to change the clock at all, because Albertans will join them in the summer and Manitobans are realigned in the winter. Almost everyone in Saskatchewan is a passionate supporter of the province's professional football team, Roughriders. During the Canadian Football League season, you will see crowds of Roughriders fans wherever their team is playing. For the Rider Nation, everybody's blood runs green. Hockey is a highly popular sport in the province. Statistics show that more than 490 NHL players have been born in Saskatchewan, the highest per capita output of any Canadian province, US state, or European country. Saskatchewan's landscapes are varied and vivid, ranging from plains to dense forests, from rolling hills to meandering river and glittering lakes. Adopted in 1969, the provincial flag shows how colorful the province is. The bright yellow depicts the grain fields in the southern portion of the province, whereas the green represents the northern forested areas. The western red lily is the provincial flower. Although the provincial economy has diversified significantly in recent years, agriculture remains the mother industry for Saskatchewan. Given the importance of wheat, it is a precious component of the provincial flag. From the provincial coat of arms to the provincial flower, the flag reflects the tradition, the values, and the beauty of nature that the people of Saskatchewan cherish. Known as Land of Living Skies, as shown on the province's vehicle license plates, Saskatchewan is truly a land full of vitality and beauty, a land where only the sky is the limit. Thank you for watching and listening. Please subscribe to this channel, Words of Woods.